We'll hear from Fred MacMahon, Director of the Center for Trade and Globalization Studies at the Fraser Institute.
These days, every talk starts with the awkward pause as the PowerPoint presentation gets put up on the board. I'd like to thank Ron very much for inviting me here. This looks to be a very interesting seminar here and a very fascinating series. I must say, though, I'm awfully glad not to be talking on a day when something exciting is happening in the stock markets. I don't think anybody would be looking at me. Ron is quite right. The key thing of importance today is local policy, the quality of institutions. Ireland had great educational institutions for decades, but all these great institutions, all these great educational institutions did was enrich other countries as the Irish left Ireland, a story well known to Indians. Then when Ireland changed its economic policies, the quality of its institutions in the late 1980s, all of a sudden the Irish were going back home rather than immigrating to the rest of the world. The Economic Freedom of the World report is a report that studies the quality of institutions. More than 200 academic and policy studies have been based on it, and a recent World Bank report used the Fraser Institute Economic Freedom Index as, in fact, the marker of good quality institutions. It's a 20-year-old project now. It started, the first report appeared in 1996 after a decade of research led by Milton and Rose Friedman and Mike Walker, and involved 60 of the world's top scholars, including several other Nobel laureates. The index attempts to measure economic freedom using 42 separate variables representing government policies. It has a ranking of 141 nations, representing 95% of the world's population. And it is now a collaboration of institutes in over 71 nations, including our Indian Institute, which is very active in this. In fact, the executive director of the Fraser Institute was over visiting the Indian institution, and they had a press conference for the release this year of the Economic Freedom Report, in which the Indian Minister of Commerce attended. This is a simple definition of economic freedom. Individuals have economic freedom when the property they acquire without the use of force, fraud, or theft is protected from physical invasions by others, and they are free to use, exchange, or give their property as long as their actions do not violate the identical rights of others. We look at the size of the government and taxation. Your economic freedom is reduced, obviously, if government taxes away a lot of the income that you use. Private property and the rule of law. Free market systems are absolutely impossible without a strong rule of law on private property. Soundness of money. Government can take your property away every bit as easily through inflation as it can through taxation. Trade regulation and tariffs. You should be allowed to buy and sell from anybody in Canada or anybody from around the world. Regulation of business, labor, and capital. You should be able to hire whom you wish, work for whom you wish, borrow from whom you wish, lend to whom you wish, set up a business if you wish, and close it down if you wish. These are the members of our Worldwide Economic Freedom Network. By the way, I should explain there are two halves to this presentation. First, I'll go through what economic freedom means, and then I'll show you how India ranks in the rankings. And forgive me if I'm talking a little bit fast. 12 to 15 minutes is a short time to squeeze a lot in. These are the 10 top economically free nations, and as you can see, they include some of the best places in the world to live, and this was not inherited wealth. Singapore and Hong Kong were once two of the most poor and dismal places on the planet. This is the bottom 10 of the Economic Freedom Index, and as you can see, these are some of the worst places on the planet to live. Economic freedom since the mid-1970s has been growing worldwide. That's the world average of economic freedom based out of 10. Why is economic freedom important? Economic rights are fundamental rights in the sense that without them there can be no political or civil freedoms. If the government controls your ability to earn a living, feed and clothe your family, travel, then you in effect have no real political or civil freedoms. I sometimes have the great pleasure of talking to anti-globalist student audiences, and I say something that they all know or believe they know, that markets are fundamentally anti-democratic. And you see them nodding. Of course they know that. And then I ask them, well, if markets are fundamentally anti-democratic, then can anybody here name me a single stable democracy that does not have a market economy? And then they get a little bit confused because they know if markets are anti-democratic, then surely free market countries shouldn't be democratic, and I guess socialist countries should be. In fact, you need economic freedom to liberate you for other political and social freedoms. They are prerequisite for growth and development. Quite simply, the ingenuity and drive of individuals and families beats government planning any day of the week. This is the per capita income of the least economically free nations. At one point 30 or 40 years ago, Hong Kong and Singapore would have had a lower per capita income than many of these places. This is the per capita income of the freest nations. We'll look at quintile charts now. So it's the quartile charts rather, that's the average income of the freest nations versus the average income of the least free nations. Direct foreign investment. Of course, people claim that markets create inequality and great poverty. This is the income share of the poorest 10% of the population. In fact, there doesn't seem to be any pattern here. The poorest 10% of the population get about the same percentage of income whether they're in an economically free nation or a socialist heaven. But the big difference is because economic freedom produces wealth and prosperity, that share of the income means much more, creates a much larger real income in economically free nations. Economic freedom versus corruption. If you are economically free and can do what you want, then there's no one to bribe. If you aren't economically free and you have to get government permission to do whatever you wish, then you create the raw material for corruption. Economic freedom and civil liberties. This is a reverse scale. The more economically free the nation, the higher the level of civil liberties. India, since 1970, on a bit of an up and down path, has been moving upwards in economic freedom, and that's a key factor, I would argue the key factor behind India's recent economic growth. The World Bank once called China's marketization program the greatest poverty reduction program in the history of humankind, and I think the same thing right now is happening in India.